Once again, it's a privilege to be welcome into your homes. Today we are reading from Luke chapter 18, verse 9 to 14. Jesus addressed this parable to those who were convinced of their own righteousness and despised everyone else. Two people went up to the temple area to pray. One was a Pharisee, the other was a tax collector. The Pharisee took up his position and spoke his prayer to himself. "O God, I thank you that I'm not like the rest of humanity, greedy, dishonest, adulterous, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I pay tithes on my whole income." But the tax collector stood off at a distance and would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast and prayed, "O God, be merciful to me, a sinner." I tell you, the latter went home justified, not the former. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted. How we pray can say a great deal about the kind of person we are. In the reading, there is a story of two men who prayed in the temple. The prayer of the Pharisee was a prayer of thanksgiving. He thanks God for the way he lives his life, recognizing God as the source of his good living. It is a perfectly acceptable form of prayer. However, it had one fatal flaw. In praying, he passed judgment on a fellow worshipper, thanking God that he was not a sinner like the tax collector standing some distance away. In life, the Pharisee looked down on the tax collector as his moral inferior, and his prayer reflected that judgmental attitude. His prayer displayed a love of God, but it was devoid of love for his fellow worshipper, his neighbor, failing to fulfill what Jesus called the second greatest commandment, to love our neighbor as ourselves. He failed to live the first commandment, loving God with all his being. The prayer of the tax collector was shorter. It was a prayer of petition in which he acknowledged that he was a sinner and asked God for mercy. He judged himself and nobody else. And in his poverty of spirit, he entrusted himself to the loving mercy of God. Jesus declares that it was the tax collector's prayer that was acceptable to God, and he was the one who went home right with God. Dear friends, the parable reminds us that when we come before the Lord in prayer, there is to be no room for comparing ourselves favorably with others or looking down on others. Rather, we come before the Lord in prayer, always aware of our own spiritual poverty and need, and trusting ourselves to the Lord. Shalom. Peace.